Welcome back to the Presleevables March of the Machine edition. I'm your host, Cedric Phillips at Cedric A. Phillips on all the things, and I am joined once again by Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on everything. Patrick, yesterday we went through all of the battles, new card type, new mechanic, new everything. Today, we're going over the white cards.
And this is a really sweet pool of designs. We talked about it at the end yesterday after we were done talking about the battles. I actually had to make cuts on my top 5 list of my favorite designs in the set. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and the execution of some of the mechanics here, some old and some new, really novel. It's a nice collection of cards.
Speaking of which, I've also had to make cuts from my lists, but let's talk about what our lists are. If you weren't with us for our battles yesterday, what we are doing is this is our version of a set review, so that when we do get to the set review much further down the line in the resleevables, we can compare and contrast against the presleevables. Now, with that in mind, we're doing a little bit something different here. I am doing a top 5 list, and Patrick is doing a top 5 list. My top 5 list will focus on the best constructed and I'll say competitive cards of the bunch. And Patrick, your list will be?
My favorite designs from a design perspective. Just talking about what the incentives are, individual cards that I think are particularly cool or evocative or solve certain play pattern issues that you see with cards of this type. Just the stuff that makes me go, yeah, I like the cut of this person's jib. Whoever made this one, that person I would love to work with.
Will we have some overlap? We'll see. We'll see as we do go. But he'll talk about cards that he likes from a design perspective. I'll talk about cards I like from a constructive and competitive perspective. We'll chat about those things and where we think they're going to land in this set. And then we will move along to the next color tomorrow. Again, battles was yesterday. White cards are today. Blue cards are tomorrow. Easiest way to remember that, of course, is to like and subscribe to this here YouTube channel. We want to thank everybody for watching all the episodes of the Resleevables and the Presleevables, with more new stuff to come down the pipe as we do make our way here through 2023. With all of that stuff out of the way, we're going to do something we didn't do yesterday, which is we're going to start with an honorable mention, because as Patrick did mention, we had to cut some cards from our list, but we have a feeling that there's one card that didn't make our list that a lot of people probably want our opinion on. Why didn't it make it? Is this card good or bad? A big returning planeswalker in this set. That, of course, is Elspeth, which is now known as Archangel Elspeth. So we're going to give it an old read here real quick. 2 dubs, so 4 total mana for a legendary planeswalker that starts with 4 loyalty counters. Its +1 is create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. Its -2 is put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other creature types and gains flying. And then its -6 is return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So enters with 4, you plus it twice. That means you get to the ultimate on a 3-turn cycle.
Yeah.
The reason it didn't make my list from a competitive standpoint is, quite frankly, I don't think it's that powerful.
I don't either.
Okay.
I mean, do you want to go first, or what do you want?
Yeah, I mean, look, 4 mana to make a 1/1 with lifelink in 2023, not that good. Now, if you compare this to the original OG Elspeth, which made a 1/1, started with 4 loyalty, went up to 5, its ultimate was a -8. Okay. The 1/1 that you're creating is a little bit better from this one because it's getting lifelink. So maybe there's a bit of a callback there. However, the OG Elspeth, all of its abilities were plus abilities, right? Mm-hmm. So this one has a -2 ability to put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, which of course is something you can do when it enters the battlefield. It's going to bring it from 4 loyalty down to 2. Maybe you plus it first, and then you make the 1/1 that has lifelink into a 3/3. It becomes an angel and also gains flying, and you're doing things that way. Okay, and also giving it flying is nice. That's fine. And then the -6, return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, doesn't really strike me as a game winner like most ultimates do. So for me, every piece of this puzzle just seems underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, so when you're talking about the planeswalkers that are in that sort of classic, a plus, a minus, and an ultimate, 3 abilities, usually my shortcut for evaluating how I perceive the power level to be is, does the plus power feed into the ultimate this is on two entirely different tracks.
Yep.
The active plussing this is not putting stuff in your graveyard that you eventually get back. It does help you protect the Planeswalker. That is something, but it's not organically, compared to, say, Elspeth Sun's Champion, where you are making tokens, and then, first of all, you're getting a lot of defense, and then it gets you to an ultimate that pays you out for the tokens you have remaining in play.
Yeah, those tokens get +2/+2 in flying.
Right.
From that 6-mana Planeswalker.
So that's one heuristic that I go with is, does the plus feed the ultimate? And the second one is, how often am I getting a full mana rebate out of playing this and minusing it?
Okay.
Then at that point, it's sort of like, well, who cares? Maybe it's around next turn. Maybe my opponent has to make a bad attack. Maybe they use another card. But if I get 4 mana's worth of stuff out of my 4 mana, play this and minus it, don't really care. Really good example of that is Liliana the Veil. Very often that you're willing to pay 3 mana for a murder, and then whatever happens after that, you kind of don't care very much.
Yep.
And at some amount of the time, it actually runs away from the game after that point. 4 mana for +2/+1/+1 counters and gains flying and becomes an angel. Pretty rare that that's going to be worth 4 mana. I will call out something to keep in mind with that is it's really nice if you're playing with battles. Okay. Because the sudden, unexpected, this thing is now bigger and has evasion, and now I can get into this thing all in one shot in a way that's unexpected, and the counters are permanent. That could be something.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree with your assessment that there's just really not a ton of rate here by 2023 standards. And the normal recipe of how Planeswalkers are good, one is the plus feeds into ultimate, or 2 is minus is worth about as much mana as you're paying for the card. Don't really apply here. Another example, Teferi Time Raveler. Another card where you're often getting 3 mana worth of value by playing it and minusing it.
Yeah.
And then after that, who really cares what happens? Somehow of the time it's still gross after that.
Yes.
But you don't really care that much. You've gotten your money's worth out of it for the 3. This card really struggles through that lens, and I also think through the first one.
So, Archangel Elspeth does not make either of our top 5 lists, but now we are going to get to those top 5 lists. Patrick, you are going to start, and your first card is...
It is, I believe it is called Seraph of New Capenna.
That is correct. It is a 2 and a white, so 3 mana Angel Soldier. It's a 2/2 flyer, and for 4 and a black mana, or you can pay 2 life, given that it is a Phyrexian mana, you can transform Seraph of New Capenna. You can only transform it, though, as a sorcery, and when you do, it transforms into Seraph of New Phyrexia, which is a 3/3 Phyrexian angel with flying. Whenever Seraph of New Phyrexia attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, Seraph of New Phyrexia gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Why do you like this one from a design standpoint?
Well, a ton of reasons. I think this design is really cool. There's an interesting challenge that comes along with these cards that transform for a chunk of colorless and a Phyrexian N, whatever that mana is, which is you do want the card to feel like a gold card on the other side without it being so dissonant for the person who's just playing it as a monocolored card to get that as the payoff. I think this card does a really great job of threading the needle of it really isn't super dissonant as a mono white card. You could kind of believe it, but it is definitely more of a black-white card than a white card. And so it makes a lot of sense that, yeah, your monocolor deck has to pay some life to get this on the other side. But if you're a black-white deck, you just get it kind of a little bit easier or with a little bit more flexibility.
Okay.
I like that the game piece is the same thing but better. It's not confusing whether or not you want to transform it. Your 2/2 flyer becomes a 3/3 flyer with another power. Go ahead and do it. I also really like that the transform of this is sorcery speed, and the bonus is an attack trigger. It means none of the rate is nested in surprising your opponent with this in the middle of combat or whatever.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
To whatever extent this card is powerful, it's you just do it face up on your turn before combat, and you're happy with the results or you're not, but it's not your opponent playing around like if I attack, can he suddenly turn this thing, he or she should suddenly turn this thing into a 3/3. That's not where the rate is. Great story, really crafty execution of is this a black-white card? Is this a hybrid card? Is this a mono-white card? And I think it plays really well too.
Okay. My number 5 is Mommy. It's Elish Norn. There's a lot of text going on here, so bear with me. 2 dub. That's 4 mana, 3/5, legendary Phyrexian Praetor with Vigilance. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, that source's controller loses 2 life unless they pay a generic 1. Okay? Then for 2 and a white, so 3 total mana, and sacrificing 3 other creatures, you exile Elish Norn, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. This is going to transform into the Argent Etchings. As this saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter. So once this transforms, you're going to resolve chapter 1, which is incubate to 5 times, then transform all incubator tokens you control. So incubate 2 means you're going to make 0/0. You're going to make a token that has 2+1/+1 counters on it, and then you can pay 2 mana to transform it into a Phyrexian. However, this is having it so that you immediately transform all of your incubator tokens. So this is effectively make 5 2/2s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chapter 2. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain double strike until end of turn. So that means at the very least, your 5 incubate tokens now are 3/3s with double strike. So that means they're each attacking for 6, and you've got 5 of them, so that if none of them get blocked, that's 30 points of damage, which is a ton. And this also assumes that you have nothing else going on, which you probably do. And then, chapter 3, if the game hasn't ended by this point, destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians, which those incubator tokens are. Exile the Argent's Etchings, then return it to the battlefield, and of course it will turn face up as Elish Norn once again to effectively put your opponent into the loop.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the front half of this thing. 4 mana, 3/5 Vigilance, kind of whatever.
Yeah.
Not really all that exciting. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, the source's controller loses 2 life unless they pay 1. Again, I'm not really that excited about that. That probably matters, but how much I think is debatable.
I mean, there's going to be some decks, something like tokeny, something convoke oriented, where this might be like not an easy thing to play through.
Okay.
I agree in general, it's not that much, but there's going to be some decks that struggle to play through that.
Okay. Now, the transformation aspect of things, how often are you going to get the opportunity to do this? Well, presumably you're building your deck around this in whatever format you're playing, which is to transform this into the Argent Etchings. If I'm thinking about standard right now, the first card that comes to mind is Wedding Announcement.
Mm-hmm.
3 mana, mega 1/1. You make 3 1/1s basically off of this card over the course of 3 turns, assuming that you're not attacking with multiple creatures to trigger the draw card. White decks, most notably the mono white mid-range deck in standard, just has like a lot of random garbage lying around. You've got the Farmhand, you've got Spirited Companion, you've got things that generate tokens, you've got Sarah's Paragon bringing things back, whatever. So you probably just have enough garbage lying around that you're able to transform this Elish Norn into the Argent Etchings, in which case I think things are very good.
Yeah.
So I think the backside of this card is very good. Again, you're effectively, once you transform this, you're getting 5 2/2s. Okay. Then those 2/2s and everything else that you have is getting +1/+1 and double strike, which is a ton. And then, again, if you get to chapter 3, destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, great, lands, great, and Phyrexians, which you control because, again, those incubator tokens are Phyrexians. And then you get to exile the Argent Etchings, and Elish Norn gets to basically do its thing again.
And, I mean, there's a white toxic style deck, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Generates a bunch of the mites.
Yes. And so you've got a bunch of stuff coming from that, too.
There's, that sounds like there's some architecture already laid out for this sort of thing being decent.
I agree. So when I look at this card, I'm really looking at this as again, I don't look at the 4 mana 3/5 Vigilance aspect of things as much, but I do think that given you mentioned basically the Selesnya Toxic deck and like the cards that are Crawling Chorus, the Hive, Merrick's making tokens, like you're going to be able to transform this if you build your deck with intention. And then it's just how powerful is transforming this, and it strikes me as very powerful to transform.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing restricting you from doing this all in one shot at 7 mana.
Yes.
They can respond with a removal spell, so you need to be a little bit cagier than that, but a lot of reading this card implies doing it over the course of a bunch of turns and trying to set it up and all that. And I really think that it's more likely that, yeah, we're just sort of sitting around grinding, whatever, and play this one shot. Now I'm threatening lethal next turn.
Yep.
And if that fails, I'm blowing up all of your stuff and we do it again.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of inevitability to a card like that.
And I was also just thinking now too, as far as ways to generate creatures, we just went over Archangel Elspeth. We're not particularly fond of
No.
it, but it does make creatures. There's the Wandering Emperor, makes creatures. There's the Eternal Wanderer, makes creatures. So there are enough planeswalkers that are also going to generate creatures that, again, sacrificing 3 other creatures, that's pretty high cost, but I don't think you're going to have trouble finding 3 creatures to sacrifice.
No, I don't think so either. It also plays really well with the incubation stuff just because a lot of this is setting up the moment.
Yeah.
So cards that allow you to have a creature on call when you're ready, but can't be broken up along the way by your opponent's removal, can allow you to sort of tactically set up the spot where you're doing the thing.
Yeah. Now, do I think this card is a 4 of? I don't. But I do think this card probably sees some play in Standard. Wouldn't be surprised if it's all play in Pioneer. Think it's a little too slow for Modern, but I think this is a really cool card. And again, I know I'm not much of a Commander player, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this card as a Commander or showing up in Commander decks. So Elish Norn, Old Mommy, little shout out there to Rhea Ripley. You're number 5. Patrick, we're going to go to your number 4, which is
Golden Scale Aeronaut. Want to call this one out, even though very simple, obviously nowhere near constructed playable, not doing any of that.
4 and a white, 2/3 dwarf pilot. It has flying, it has new ability of backup, and it has backup 1. So in case you're not aware what backup is, you can probably see the card on the screen. But the reminder text here is when this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If that's another creature, so not the Golden Scale Aeronaut, it gains the following ability until end of turn, which in this case would be flying.
Love this design.
Okay.
First of all, some issue with backup is it's a little bit cumbersome. Hey, did you remember that there's like a trigger from this other thing that's affecting this thing that's attacking now because I put the counter there? This one is pretty easy to track and reconcile because it gives flying. You try to block with something that can't block it, you can't block, back it up. So it's pretty simple as far as that stuff goes.
Okay.
I also really like, again, simple design. We're not talking like this would be one of the first cards you put in the file, maybe when you decide that you're going to do backup, is a 3/4 flyer is really good at playing defense.
Yep.
A 2/3 flyer that comes with +1/+1 and jump something leans very aggressive.
Okay.
And so even though the card doesn't look like it's that dynamic because it's so simple, the 2 paths that it gives you, give yourself a sturdy flying creature that can block and maybe attack next turn versus tactically send your thing up, hit for some damage, and now you have your 2/3 back, which can't block as well, but maybe you're happy to attack with the following turn.
Mm-hmm.
Means that there's like a lot of room for this to play really well and differently and dynamically, and people draw like making different plays with it in different spots without it being overly cumbersome or reading like the type of thing that's super dynamic or modal. Like I'm imagining this card showing up in draft and just being like, I'm definitely going to play it. What do I want to do?
Yeah, sure.
It's actually like kind of hard and depends on the specifics of the texture of the game in question. And to get all of that on a design that is basically as simple as you can get. Again, I think this shows a lot of wisdom about design. I think this mana cost and these stats are really great for getting that bifurcated sort of decision tree. And I believe this card's going to play really, really well, not be overly burdensome, and show off backup in a cool and exciting way.
I like backup as a new mechanic.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. I think there's a lot of fun decision points. I have a backup card on my list that I think is going to be pretty good here too. So I'm digging what this card is doing because this is just kind of your, as you kind of mentioned, it's your general, it's in the file. It's going to make the file every time. It's not overpowered, but the decision trees are fun and the gameplay is dynamic.
Yeah, that's the essence of backup, right? I'm either paying for stability and durability on this card, or I'm paying for sort of a tactical burst on another card.
Yeah. That's
naturally where it's going to guide you. And flying is so good at being a combination of offense and defense such that that decision becomes like 3-dimensional kind of complexity to it. It's really great. Great stuff.
Number 4 for me is going to be a new removal spell. It is named Cut Short. It costs 2 and a white most of the time. I say that because this instant has Convoke, which is back, one of our favorite abilities. If you were with us for the Presleevables when we talked about Ravnica, the OG, we were big fans of Convoke then. I still think we're big fans of Convoke now. Little reminder text here, your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for 1 generic or 1 mana of that creature's color. Destroy target planeswalker that was activated this turn or tapped creature. So if something's working its way into the red zone, you can kill it before it deals damage. If something attacked last turn, you draw a cut short. You can kill it because it's tapped, or if a planeswalker's activated ability, you can end of turn kill with cut short, but you can't kill it right away.
Right.
I presume that this card is powerful but not overpowered. So we have seen over the course of the past decade, since planeswalkers have been introduced, Hero's Downfall, Murderous Rider, various ways, mostly in black to kill planeswalkers, right? And then we see in white, a lot of the time it is an Oblivion Ring style card that takes care of your planeswalkers. Okay. And there's been various ways that Wizards of the Coast has created ways to take care of planeswalkers. This is one of the more unique ways because it does allow for the player in question to use their planeswalker, which also means it allows for the player to not use their planeswalker, which I think is kind of interesting. It also allows for the player with a creature to attack with their creature, or more importantly, not attack with their creature. Now, one could argue that if they're not attacking with their creature, that's a good thing, but there's the game inside the game where you're supposed to or not supposed to because you might be playing around cut short. Toss in the fact that this card can be disguised, given Convoke, that it is not there, but is actually there. And then you have to make those sort of decisions around, like, do I think you have cut short and can play it off of 1 white mana and 2 creatures, or 3 creatures and no mana, whatever. There's a lot going on with this card. I don't expect this to be, whenever I think of a removal spell, I think of Smother. Like way back in the day, it was just like you started your black base decks like Psychotog with 4 Smother to kill everything. I don't think it's going to be that. I do think this could be like a 1 to a 3 of, depending on what the format looks like, because it depends on planeswalkers and creatures and stuff. But I think this is a good removal spell, and I know this is my number 4. This is his number 3.
Right. So I'll just piggyback.
Yeah. So you piggyback right into number 3 while you like the design.
Okay. So all that stuff you're saying about the interesting tactical decision is true, and it's particularly true in this design because of Convoke.
Yeah.
So you get into spots all the time that's like, okay, so they got 2 mana up. They got a negate. They could have a negate. I got this planeswalker in my hand. They negate it. That's bad. So do I wait? And part of sort of sorting that out is, well, am I giving them more time to draw negates? Or are they going to use their mana to do something else anyway? How many negates do they even have? And part of it is, well, if they're leaving up 2 mana to negate and they're committed to doing that because they're worried about my planeswalker or whatever, how good is it for me if I just make them leave up 2 for a while here?
Yeah, sure.
And maybe I can set up a spot where I'm playing over the top, or I have a discard spell to force it through, whatever. This is all of that, except it's so much more confusing because the mana cost is changing the whole time. It goes from 3 mana to 0 mana, back and forth all across the range, depending on what your opponent's doing. So the decision of, do I play around cut short is more interesting than the negate and spell pierce type of stuff, which is stimulating an interesting decision, because it's like, oh, well, you have 3 up this turn, but I know the following turns you're just going to have your creatures back. So I know that I'm not going to get a better spot. I might as well just do it. Or based on the particulars of your mana and your creatures that you have untapped, this is a particularly good turn for you to cut short. You'd be thrilled if you got to trade this for whatever I do with my turn.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make you sit this turn, and then next turn I'm going to do the thing, because this is like the best turn for you to be based on just the cards you have, the mana you have up. So awesome. Another thing that I really like about this design is, I got to be honest with you, I think the instant speed destroy target tap creature is super corny.
Okay.
The card Assassinate is like, well, something had to happen for the thing to get tapped, and it means they got something out of it, presumably.
Okay.
Destroy target tap creature as an instant is like, yeah, they attacked you.
Sure.
So it's tapped. So now I get rid of the thing and whatever. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. It's just not my favorite thing.
Okay.
And I know that they have leaned into white getting more of that, and part of it is It does feel very white. It's kind of a retribution feel, and also they need to carve out more design space for white, so gotta just do whatever. This is a design that actually justifies it, because Planeswalker that was activated this turn is really the only something that you can reference on an instant, because that's only happening on your turn. Yep. So if you're going to do this sort of thing, it makes sense to weave in something that makes it make sense. Like, oh yeah, of course this can destroy attacking creatures, because this is all about interacting on the actions my opponent is taking on their turn.
Yep.
So plays really well. Interesting execution of Convoke. Last little bit that I love about this stuff is you've got a mana up and a creature back. Sorry, you've got a creature up and you're like post-combat, play a creature with a mana up. And I'm like, well, if Cedric is planning on cut shorting here and I use a removal spell on a turn.
Yeah, I can't cut short now.
Totally blown out.
Yeah.
And that's something that doesn't happen with other Convoke removal spells like Stoke the Flames, for example, because I can just stoke in response.
Sure.
The fact that this is Convoke meets extremely time sensitive means there's this sick cat and mouse game that doesn't involve any verbal communication. The card might not even be in either of our decks, but if we're aware about it, it can set up some sweet moments of being like, well, it's got cut short right now. I'm just knocking that out and going to just get blown out.
Yeah, just go about my business.
Right.
Which is like, play my Planeswalker, activate it. You can't cut short it now. Go.
And then maybe you're thinking like, well, maybe I actually shouldn't play the creature because it's so risky. I might as well just leave up the mana for cut short because I need to make sure that I play it this turn.
Yep. That
sort of back and forth and thinking about, well, what's their response? How likely is it that they have a removal spell to blow this up? Is cut short going to be on their radar? They're thinking about it. Are they on that level? Like that stuff that requires, like I said, no verbal communication, not knowing about the cards in our decks, but like you're thinking about it and I'm thinking about it, and you play something and I'm like, well, maybe that means cut short's in their hand, or maybe you're bluffing that there's a cut short. Well, all that. That stuff is so good, and it just comes in a card that's very simple, very innocuous.
Love it. Love it. So that was my number 4 for competitive and constructed. That was your number 3 for...
Love that design.
For design.
Love it.
So we're going to go to my number 3 now for competitive and constructed. And I said I had a backup card on the list, and it is going to be Boonbringer Valkyrie. So 3 dub, 5 mana Angel Warrior, 4/4 with a backup of 1. This card also has flying, first strike, and lifelink. So I'm not the biggest fan of doing comps, but I'm going to do one here. We've got some Baneslayer Angel vibes.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly Baneslayer Angel because of backup. And also no protection from demons and dragons, obviously. But what makes this interesting is obviously the backup. Because as you mentioned with the Aeronaut, do you want to make this a 5/5? That is just like, bang, I'm back here on defense. Best of luck. You can't get through this thing. Or do you want to give the +1/+1 counter, flying first strike and lifelink over to something else to get a hit in? Maybe you're playing against a red deck, you're going to gain 3 or 4 life, and then presumably this thing as a 4/4 flying first strike lifelinker can hold the fort as well, right? So you need the immediate burst of life. Maybe it's not even much life. Maybe it's just like 2 life, right? And then you're hoping that this gets to sit there, basically stop your opponent from doing something, and then you get to start attacking with it as well, right? It's decisions, which are very, very interesting. And now, again, because I don't know how the format is going to shape up, and none of us do, we don't know if this is just going to be most of the time, if it's just going to be play Boonbringer Valkyrie, put the counter on this, go, and it is essentially Baneslayer Angel or cards of its ilk, like Lyra Dawnbringer, or if it is going to be, put a +1/+1 counter on here. Again, because +1/+1 counters, we can think of things like Hardened Scales, giving multiple counters to things. Like, who knows what's going to happen with this, right? But you have a decision, and we also really haven't seen a Baneslayer Angel-esque card, it feels like, in a little while, too.
Do you want my power level assessment here?
Yeah, of course.
I know Baneslayer's, that's kind of ancient history to some extent, whatever. I think this card is way better than Baneslayer Angel.
Okay.
Way better. Specifically the format are going to, define whether or not it actually shows up. But the biggest issue with Baneslayer Angel is all of my eggs are in one basket.
Yep.
I played my 5 mana, play this thing on the main phase, and if my opponent has a removal spell, I have nothing to show for it, and I'm down tempo. You ideally would like to spread out your Baneslayer a little bit, such that your opponent has to make the decision of, say, killing some creature that was previously innocuous, that now is hitting for some damage and gaining some life, or forcing my opponent to play through this 4/4 the following turn. Because then this is a 4/4 Baneslayer.
Yep.
And the turn after. So the ability to sort of spread it out a little bit, have something to show for your efforts, even in the event that they had a removal spell. And if you're talking about Baneslayer being good against, the mono reds of the world, or, sometimes other monocolor creature decks, but that's primarily what you're talking about here. The floor is basically Baneslayer. It's not that different because the game just comes down to, like, can they kill this on the spot or not? And if you happen to have another creature to pair with this, you get that experience of, like, okay, well, I'll hit you for 4. Now, even if my Baneslayer dies, I gain 4 and have a counter on a thing for next turn. And if you don't have a removal spell, this is still roughly as good as Baneslayer Angel to block next turn and then all the turns afterwards.
Yeah.
So, again, I know that's comparing it to something of a dinosaur at this point, but I think this card it's going to get compared to Baneslayer a lot for obvious reasons. I think this is a lot better. This is basically all the spots where Baneslayer is bad. This is at least giving you a little bit of your money back. And that's a huge deal when you're talking about a card that's so good against a specific class of opponent.
I will also note, too, that Angels are appearing to be a more important creature type recently. So in this set, there are call-outs to Angels. So this could be, the fact that it is an Angel could matter. The fact that it could be a Warrior, I think, is a little bit lesser. But again, there's so many sets of Magic now. Maybe there's some Warrior deck that I'm not even aware of and I'm offending someone. Sorry, Warriors fans out there, except for those that like Golden State.
Boo.
Boo. Not sorry about that. So just keep in mind the creature type also does matter. So that's number 3 for me. We're going to your runner-up for favorite design.
Knight Errant of Eos.
4 and a white. That's going to be 5 mana. Human Knight. It's a 4/4 with Convoke, so it can get a little assist on casting it. When Knight Errant of Eos enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards with mana value X or less from among them, where X is the number of creatures that convoked Knight Errant of Eos. Put the revealed cards in your hand, then shuffle.
I really like cards that kind of take you in a couple of different directions in a way that's not mutually exclusive. Because usually what that means is you do a mix of both of those things. I brought this up a lot with, like, let's say Knight of the Ebon Legion. Do you play with all just like super aggro creatures and then just dump your mana in this thing? Or do you just play with a bunch of 4 power creatures so you're triggering this thing automatic? Okay. Play a blend of both. It's actually how it turns out a lot of the time. This has some of that going on here, which is the Convoke designs are naturally going to gravitate towards flood the battlefield with a bunch of stuff and play this for as cheap as possible. But the output on this is naturally capped if you're doing it with a bunch of Ornithopters, because you're not revealing anything good. You're just getting more trash.
Okay.
So you would ideally like to have some relatively bigger hits in your Convoke deck, such that when you convoke this thing, you actually get some gas. It's not just more Memnites and Ornithopters.
Okay.
And I think this card does a really great job of, like I said, the cheap stuff is naturally going to play well with a card with Convoke. Especially a card that's asking you to count up how many times you convoked.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have no problem getting that thing in with 1 mana creatures, tokens, 0 mana creatures, all of that. But making the payoff something that specifically says, like, you want some like 3 or 4 mana cards in your deck. You don't want this to all be garbage. I think is a really great way of aligning the incentives and making sure that people playing with their Convoke decks don't have to play nothing but unappealing cards. There's some level of, yeah, this thing's good with 3 mana stuff if you work hard enough at it, but it's not an easy thing to do. Love that.
I'm really glad Convoke is back. I really am.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and they're doing some unique things with it, with the cards that we've mentioned in our top 5s, and I'm not surprised to see Convoke cards in here as part of our top 5. So I do think the Knight Errant of Eos, initially, I have that on my outside looking in list. You know, of just like, what can this really do? It probably does more than I give it credit for in competitive Magic.
Yeah. I
think so. I'm going to get to my runner-up now, which admittedly is a little bit boring, but this is what I've picked. It is Seal from Existence, 1 white, so 3 total mana, enchantment. It has Ward of 3, and when Seal from Existence enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until Seal of Existence leaves the battlefield. It's kind of just the ultimate O-ring.
Yeah.
Right? We have seen various types of Oblivion Rings and Banishing Lights and what have yous over the past handful of years. This one is not particularly splashable, given that it does have double white in the casting cost, but it's not particularly easy to kill either, given the ward of 3. So you're going to have to work for it a little bit to kill this. I think immediately of a card like Boseiju, which does a really clean job of taking care of Oblivion Ring style effects, and it's got to work for it to get this one off of the battlefield. And if you're in the market for an Oblivion Ring style effect, which I believe sees play in quite a bit of formats, which I think is good, right? It normally sees play in standard formats. You'll see it in commander formats. You'll see it in Pioneer. Sometimes you'll even see it in Modern if particular things need to be exiled in this fashion. This is really the best way that you can go about doing it. Now, how effective is that ward? I mean, ward 3 is a lot. That's the thing for me here is this could have been, and this is a very obvious statement, it could have been ward 2. It could have been ward 1, which is effectively none, but not none all the time. Ward 3 means that if you're killing this, you're killing this with intention.
Most of the weaknesses of Oblivion Rings have to do with it being tempo and or card inefficient when your opponent has the answer. Mm-hmm. 3 mana to get rid of anything is a pretty good deal. The problem is a lot of things that blow up enchantments are like 1 mana instants.
Yeah.
Or creatures with an enter as the battlefield trigger or whatever. Insulating yourself from that risk, it's really hard for this to be tempo inefficient because your opponent has to, as you mentioned, pay so much mana to get rid of it, almost no matter what the circumstances are. Means that it's protecting you from the spots where your Oblivion Ring is bad. And, it's kind of the same thing with the Baneslayer Angel, right? It's really efficient from a power perspective to add rate to the 10% of the time the normal card is bad.
Sure.
So, and Ward 3 on Oblivion Ring is a great example of it doesn't sound like very much. How often is your Oblivion Ring getting blown up and all that? But when Oblivion Ring is bad, it's because it's getting blown up. Yeah, that's really bad.
And you're getting destroyed mid-combat or, something.
Yeah, it's end of turn, erase it. Okay, cool. My Planeswalker's reset, untap.
Yeah.
I have, all my mana, all my cards.
Yep.
That's what makes Oblivion Ring vulnerable or not good to play sometimes. And this card very naturally solves that downside risk.
I think it's a very straightforward card. We have seen Oblivion Ring style effects for a very long time in Magic now. I'm not going to say that this is the best of the bunch because that doesn't feel true to me. And it's also format dependent, right? Because, I'm thinking of Conclave Tribunal, which was the Convoke style Oblivion Ring. And we've seen so many different variants of it that some are just going to be better than others. And it's always going to be format dependent. But it is my belief that this is going to be a pretty good white card moving forward.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to there's the one with Flash and, there's Detention Sphere if you want to go. They all have their pros and cons. But I think are you playing with a lot of white mana and are in the market for this sort of thing?
Yeah.
I think this is probably going to be best in slot.
So we had a little bit of overlap with Cut Down. That was number 4 for me on my competitive list, number 3 for you on the design list. We have the same card on the top of our list for both competitive and constructed and for design, which I was a little surprised about. So we get to do this at the same time. It is Sunfall. 3 white sorcery, exile all creatures, incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. Now, of course, Magic has seen plenty of sweepers in its day. We have seen 4 mana sweepers like Wrath of God. We have seen 6 mana sweepers. Can't even think of one off the top of my head, but there's been a bunch.
Yeah, sure.
Austere Command is the first one that I thought of for some reason. Final Judgment. There we go, from Kamigawa Block. I remember that one because it also exiled the creatures. Great. We've seen 5 mana sweepers. Some of them could be a little bit cheaper. First one that comes to mind is Doomscar. You could foretell it for 2, and then, of course, pay 3, 1 white, and sweep everything. Great. We've seen sweepers across multiple colors. Supreme Verdict, first one that comes to mind. This one feels pretty pushed.
Yeah.
Sure. Because it's exiling everything. It's not destroying everything. It's not destroying everything. No regeneration. It is exile. Also, you're getting something on your way out the door with Incubate X. For me, on the constructed side of things, it's pretty straightforward. If you need a sweeper, I think this might be the best of the bunch in at least standard right now. Other formats, debatable. I know that in standard, you're seeing cards like Depopulate, which is kind of a mess sweeper. It's good in certain spots for mono-white mid-range and white-based control decks, whatever. This one is kind of a no muss, no fuss. It does cost 5 as opposed to 4, which I think is a good thing, but this is a no muss, no fuss. You get to exile your creatures, and I'm kind of giving a win condition along with it.
Yeah.
That's really powerful for constructed Magic. Certainly standard. As you get older, of course, you're going to be outclassed a little bit. But for you, why do you like
Masterpiece. This? All right. There's so many good things in here. I think I'm going to forget some.
Okay.
So first of all, it's a sweeper that is unique to this set. You could not just do this anywhere else. It's calling out incubate, and so it makes sense here.
Okay.
Instead, you can do a lot of 5-mana sweepers that just have some like small bonus tacked on. Very cool to do something that actually speaks to the set. Story is really good. Makes sense for the incubate to scale on a number of cards that are getting removed. There's a processing vibe to it. Really great stuff. Again, 3, it is obviously really dramatic. The act of sweeping away 8 things and then also having an 8/8 left over is really dramatic. It will create dramatic stories.
Mm-hmm.
That drama, however, is something of an illusion of power. Because it's not like I need the help when I wrath 8 of your creatures away.
Sure.
Where this is actually modest are the spots where your wrath is kind of bad in the first place, when you're killing 1 or 2 things. So even though it's super dramatic and will have moments of being like, oh my God, did you see what happened? It is kind of an illusion because it's paying you out more in the spots where your wrath is already good. It's a wrath that actually some amount of time gets the game over with.
Sure.
That's really great. Like, again, part of the problem with the all sweeper, all remove all card drawing experience is the game doesn't end. So if you're going to subsidize someone, subsidizing them with a token that they can turn on and start hitting with, that's great. And then the last little bit I had about this one is that it's nice to give the all sweeper person a payout that turns on the opposing creature interaction. Again, part of the reason that it's really annoying, the all creatureless card drawing kind of stuff, why Magic has historically pushed back on it so much, is because there's so much power to be gained by playing a creatureless deck game 1. Because your opponent presumably has some removal spells, and if you turn them off, their mulligans, their virtual mulligans, doom them. That is so much of what the incentive is. So giving them a sweeper that's quite good, that you could certainly play in a creatureless deck, but the payout, the bonus you're getting is something that turns their murder back on and makes it not a dead card in game number 1. That, again, is awesome. And also, this is naturally more modest the second and third copies that get played.
Sure.
Another issue with the sweeper experience is like, the second and third one is also really, really sick. At a certain point, if you're just using this as a 5-mana removal spell, what's your 1/1 token worth? Probably not all that much. And so the first one might be really, really good, but the subsequent copies are less so. That might mean that the right number to play is like 3, because the fourth copy, you're not really, et cetera, et cetera. So, like I said, this to me, this design is absolutely brilliant. And to give you some more kind of like my perspective on this stuff is like, this card could be good against the decks that I play. It's not about, am I subsidizing, is this the card that makes mono red aggro good? If so, thumbs up. Like, there is a way to make sweepers and card drawing and kind of creatureless control stuff play okay, or at least acknowledge what the shortcomings are with that sort of play pattern historically and turn the dials in a way to make it not as bad as it often is. This card does all that in a way that speaks to the set and is evocative. Masterpiece. Brilliant design. Can't say enough good things about it. Might be one of my favorite sweepers ever made. This design is fantastic.
It's powerful too.
And it's not weak.
Yeah.
Doesn't look weak to me.
No.
Nope.
Doesn't read weak. There's a lot of good things going on with Sunfall. So that tops our list, and that is our white list of our top 5 cards for March of the Machine. Now we get to do the shilling. Like, subscribe. Tell us what you thought about our list in the comments. Are there some cards that we left off of our list? Yeah, there are. There's Dusk Legion Duelist that I'm looking at right now. There's Guardian of Gearpow, which was my preview card on Twitter. Heck, there's even, look, there's a Heliod in this set. There's also like the white version of Veil of Summer in some respects in Search of Salvation. Want to know our thoughts on those cards? Think we're stupid for leaving them off of our top 5 list? That's what the comments are for. Let us know. Also, if you do want to subscribe to our Patreon, where you can get episodes early of the Resleevables and also of our Unsleeved podcast, you can head over to patreon.com/theresleevables. You get some cool stuff too, some stickers and some lands that we sign, all the other stuff as well. But most importantly, we're going to come back tomorrow. And tomorrow we're talking about the blue cards. Now, I don't know about you, but I had a hard time finding 5 blue cards.
Well, you know my thoughts on blue. Blue is like, I don't I don't love it, but sometimes I do like to win.
Sure.
I haven't unpacked the designs just yet, but I'm sure I'll come up with 5.
Yeah, I had some difficulty getting to 5, but I'll come up to 5 for tomorrow as well, and that's where we're gonna see you back here tomorrow for our top 5 blue cards. See you then.